Hey there, guys. So, we're here in our second week of our 1101 composition and rhetoric class. What is going on this week? Well, let's talk about what you've done for the first week. You did the no show discussion forum on the Matt Taibbi article. I enjoyed reading your contributions to that. As long as you all made a post, contributed to someone else's post, you will get full credit for that. You also have the two narrative essays you had to read in our reader. My Mother Never Worked and Shooting an Elephant. You had the discussion questions that I had attached, and you were to make reference to the two essays in your response. You also had the SCC textbook work to do. That was chapter 3, exercises 2 and 3. And that was all in preparation for your narrative essay. Now, what you had written in those responses, you could use that as a building block for your very own narrative essay. In fact, that is what is due at the end of this week. You don't have to. You can make up something completely new. And let me talk about make up, okay? This essay due Sunday, 2 to 3 pages, Times New Roman, 12-point font. You need a title. You need a heading. Okay, look at the paper format attachment in our page. When you go into lessons, you'll see it there. It's the third attachment from the top, paper format. Keep that handy throughout the whole term. It gives you the, how things are supposed to look, okay? You need an original title. You need a thesis statement at the end of your first paragraph, your introduction paragraph, okay? 2 to 3 pages, okay? The narrative asks you to respond to the topic of a particularly meaningful experience. So, since you only have 2 to 3 pages to write this thing, that's why I'm asking you to respond to a particularly meaningful experience, not give your entire life story. In 2 to 3 pages, you don't have time to recount your life from when you were born up until your late teens, okay? You don't have the space to do that. So pick that, if I were writing this, there are several moments in my 35 years that stand out to me, okay? I could pick one of them and write a 2 to 3 page paper about it, okay? For example, let's say you have been estranged from your parent, let's say your mother or father, for 10 years, okay? And all of a sudden, you're sitting down to dinner with your other siblings and your other parent one night, and there's a knock at the door. Your parent goes to the door, opens the door, and there's your other parent from whom you have been estranged all these years, okay? Well, it seems to me that would be a pretty big shocker, okay? So my thesis statement, the last statement of my introduction in that example there, could be something like, and then as my mother opened the door, I saw him, the man who's been missing from my life for the past 10 years, okay? That could be our thesis statement. The thesis statement is an expression of the main idea of the essay. Now, in a story, for a thesis statement, you're not necessarily saying, you're not necessarily making an argumentative point. You could kind of give us a suspenseful little cliffhanger, something that makes us want to read on, okay? That example I just gave, well, I would want to read on, okay? Who is this guy? Who is this father you've been setting up in the introduction? Boom, there he is in the thesis statement after not having seen him for 10 years, okay? Let's read on more about him in the body paragraphs about your relationship, okay? Maybe you could kind of recount that time before he left and then come back to the present time, okay? And that encounter as he knocks at the door and your mom opens the door and there he is, okay? So that is what we're talking about. It's a story, okay? And I ask you all, I suggest at least that you write about yourself, okay? Because what's easier to write about than yourself in a narrative, a personal story, okay? We are not asking for, in fact, I don't want a wildly over-the-top sort of creative writing piece. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but For example, I don't want a Star Wars themed story. I don't want to read about spaceships flying in space and galactic battles or superheroes fighting each other or stuff like that, okay? I want something nonfiction in the realm of the real, okay? Now, it's up to you what you're willing to share, okay? You can even fudge some of the details. I won't know the difference. I don't know any of you personally, okay? But as long as it reads to me like a story, a real, true story, like the George Orwell story, for example, he is actually telling you about a time in his life when he was working for the British military, when he was in India. And that was an actual account of a moment in his life. And that was a pretty life-changing moment, probably, okay? Does he shoot the elephant? He's got all these villagers' eyes on him. Does he stick to his duty as a subject of the crown? Does he do what is right? We have this kind of moral dilemma going on. And as readers, we feel for him. We could put ourselves in his shoes, okay? That's kind of what you're going for here. You want to engage, compel your reader, which is me, okay? How do you tell a successful, compelling story? You use the senses. You want to appeal to sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, etc., okay? That's what makes your story come to life, is it not? And you might have heard of that saying, that expression, show, don't tell. That's like the golden rule for all writers. What's the difference between me showing you something and telling you something, okay? If I told you I woke up this morning, okay, we all wake up in the morning, don't we? But what if I show you how I woke up this morning, okay? As I pulled back the covers and the light beamed through the blinds, I thought to myself, here's the day that I make a difference, okay? It's expressing the same thing, but there's more to it. I'm showing you how I got up, and I'm also telling you a little bit about what I'm thinking. I'm going to make a difference today. It's much more effective than just telling you I got up in the morning, okay? So you want to think, show, don't tell. Be demonstrative, illustrative. Paint a picture in this story, okay? A story, something happens, okay? There is something going on, okay? So make sure, it might be good to have some action here, maybe some dialogue. You don't have to. The whole thing could be narration, where you as the narrator of the piece are just recounting events. If you'd like to have dialogue where you are speaking to someone else and that person is replying to you and you're having a little exchange, there are ways to do that. Usually for dialogue, you have a comma after your quotes, okay? You say your piece in quotation marks, okay? Comma, and then he said, okay? So that is, you can look up various ways to do dialogue tags online. But if you're not comfortable doing dialogue, then just don't worry about it, okay? So that is due. Also, your first journal is going to be due, okay? Now, what a journal is, it is a reflection piece. That is where you are reflecting on the mode of discourse. Our mode of discourse for this unit is narrative. So go ahead and look in the journal section, our journal folder, and you are going to see the first journal for narrative writing, okay? So again, in addition to your essay being due Sunday, also due by Sunday night is your first journal. Click on the link in the journals folder. Journal on why you think narrative writing is important. For example, you might ask yourself, why is storytelling such an integral human practice? What do we learn from, and how do we benefit by sharing stories? What's the deal? Why do we tell stories to each other anyway? Parakeets don't tell stories to each other. Dogs don't tell stories to each other. People do, though. What makes that whole enterprise of storytelling such a human thing? Why do we do it? Why do we read books? Why do we watch movies? Those are all stories, right? Songs have stories to them, do they not? So why do we do this whole storytelling, listening to stories business, okay? That is your journal. It should be 2 to 3 paragraphs, okay? your journal is going to be worth a class homework assignment. And we're going to do these interspersed throughout the week, or throughout the semester, I should say. So again, your first essay is due by the end of the week, by Sunday night, your narrative essay on a particularly meaningful life experience, okay? That, in addition to that, your first journal is due Sunday as well. Any questions, let me know. I'd say that I would be happy to look over your work, maybe review a rough draft with you. I just don't have the time, or I can't spread myself that thin because I teach middle school here in the Jacksonville area in Florida. That's my 9-to-5 job. I have 4 classes online, and I'm also taking classes, going to school myself. So I simply don't have time to read your rough drafts. If I had a proctor there, like somebody at the high school, which is usually the case, but due to COVID, everything's different. Some of you are doing virtual learning. I don't have somebody there to assist me with these things. So I'm sorry to say that I'm not going to be able to have time to read a rough draft. But if you want to still email me and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's my story idea, that's a good thing to do, okay? But I would recommend doing that early this week, okay? It's due at the end of the week after all. And one other thing, I don't want to read any story about self-harm or violence. No violence to yourself or to others, okay? If you want to use profanity in dialogue, that's okay. But don't get carried away with it. And don't use it in your narration, okay? If somebody said a naughty word in dialogue, like in speech, that's okay if you absolutely have to use the word, if you are trying to preserve the authenticity of the moment. But don't get carried away with it. It looks cheap and immature after a while, okay? All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Your first essay, your first journal are due by the end of the week. I'll work on getting your other grades from this first week turned back around to you. Hope you all have a good week. Email me with questions, and I will check your ideas if you email them to me for your essay, okay? All right, bye-bye.